अग्निमीळे पुरोहितं यज्ञस्य देवमृत्विजम् होतारं रत्नधातमम्.
The Rig Veda, possibly the oldest literature in any Indo-European language available to mankind today, though only in parts. But how old is it really? Is it possible to date the Rig Veda scientifically with logical evidence? Yes, we believe so. That is the purpose of this video, to establish the real date of the Rig Veda. If you like this video, please forward it to your contacts and please subscribe to this channel Unknown India. The dating of the Rig Veda around 1200 BCE in currency now, consequent to the dating of the entire Vedic age from 1200 to 500 BCE, is totally arbitrary and devoid of any logic. To be honest, it is ridiculous and laughable, because this time span covers the composition and propagation of all the four Vedas, namely Rig, Yajur, Sama and Atharva, and their constituent parts, namely Samhitas or hymns, Brahmanas or prescriptions for rituals, Aranyakas or spiritual explanations of the rituals, and fourthly Upanishads, the philosophical essence of the Vedas. This assignment gave only an interval of around 200 years for the development of each of the four Vedas. Since Rig Veda was the oldest of the four Vedas, its period of origin or composition was fixed as around 1200 BCE. Max Muller, the noted Indologist of German origin, who has done very great service to Sanskrit literature with several of his translations of and articles on Vedic texts, arbitrarily assigned a time span of 1200 to 500 BCE for the Vedic period. This assignment of time period was totally arbitrary and lacked any scientific basis. This dating was constrained by Max Muller's affirmed full faith in the stories of Genesis and the chronology given by the Bishop James Ussher, that is, the universe was created on the 23rd of October 4004 BCE. He was therefore obliged to accommodate the whole Indian Vedic literature within the time frame provided by Ussher. He was also a believer in the Aryan invasion theory invented by himself, according to which the Aryans invaded India and drove out the original inhabitants around 1500 BCE. This theory has since been debunked by historians and scholars around the world. We will publish a separate video on that debunking later. Now returning to the subject of this video. So, Max Muller gave 300 years to the Aryan invaders to settle down and then start writing the Vedas. Some contemporary and noted Indologists and Sanskritists like M.A. Winternitz, H.H. Wilson, W.D. Whitney and T. Goldstucker did object vehemently to this whole methodology of Max Muller, assigning randomly 200 years to different Vedic periods and literatures. Most of the Western Sanskritists were shocked at this arbitrariness of Max Muller, bordering on brazenness, and they issued statements strongly criticizing and condemning it. Stung by the criticism of contemporary and famous Indologists, Max Muller retracted on his foolhardy dating and wrote an apology and said, "Like most Sanskrit scholars, I feel that 200 years are scarcely sufficient to account for the growth of the poetry and religion ascribed to the Vedic period." But the damage had been done, and because of Max Muller's stature in the Western academic world as an authority on Indian religious literature, this dating has unfortunately stuck in Indian history books, including school and college texts. This is sad and shameful. As Max Muller's dating of Vedas was completely arbitrary with no logic or scientific evidence or approach, we reject outright his estimate and approach for dating of the Vedas completely. And instead, we offer a totally acceptable scientific approach. We must remember that the Vedic tradition of teaching was more through spoken rather than written word, passed on by the guru or teacher to his sishyas or students generation after generation. So looking for a physical written text form of Rigveda on paper or palm leaves or clay tablets or stones for radiocarbon dating or other scientific scrutinies or even for other external evidence is futile. We now have only 2 out of the original 21 branches of Rigveda, and even the written forms in Devanagari script are from very recent times only. Therefore, we must look for evidence in the verses of the Rigveda itself which give indications of its history. Such an approach was recommended by one of the noted Indologists, Winternietz, who had vehemently opposed Max Muller's arbitrary dating. Our approach is indeed based on authentic astronomical data found in the Rigveda itself, and also on calculations put forth through independent researches by the multifaceted Indian scholar Bal Gangadhar Tilak and the noted and respected German Indologist Professor Hermann Jacobi. Based on these researches, we conclude that the hymns of the Rigveda are at least as old as 4000 to 4500 BCE. That is, they were composed or revealed as early as at least 6000 to 6500 years ago. What follows in the rest of the video is a detailed presentation of the evidence in the Rigveda and other Vedic texts, an analysis of astronomical data using different models leading to solid proof of the dating. A brief introduction on the basics of astronomy is also provided for the benefit of those of you who are not familiar with it. The timestamps of both the start and end of each of the different sections that follow is provided in the description to this video to help you decide what level of detail you want to get into in viewing the rest of this video. Happy viewing! Tilak was a renowned lawyer and prominent freedom fighter. He ran a Marathi newspaper called Kesari and was affectionately called Lokamanya, meaning respected by people. But he was also a great scholar, well versed not only in ancient Indian scriptures but also in the modern sciences of astronomy, mathematics, etc. Tilak's research on the age of the Vedas is presented in his book The Orion, or Research into the Antiquity of Vedas. It is available both in print and downloadable PDF document. I have provided the link in the credit section as well as the description of this video. Tilak's book Orion was first published in 1893, but even a year before its publication, that is in 1892, a summary of its findings had been published in the proceedings of the 9th International Congress of Orientalists held in London. Its download link is also provided in the description. Hermann Jacobi has done considerable research on Indian astronomy and Jainism studies. He also wrote a landmark book containing the grammar and glossary of Prakrit language. Jacobi contributed a paper on the age of the Vedas in Festschrift, a book honoring Rudolf Roth, another noted German Indologist. He again published his views in an article on the origin of Vedic culture in the Journal of the Royal Asiatic Society in 1908. An article on the date of the Rigveda was also published on page 154 in the journal Indian Antiquary, volume 23 of 1894 Common Era. A link to free PDF download of this copy of the journal is also provided in the description of this video and the credits. It is remarkable that their researchers, though resting on similar ideas, were independent of each other, as they were not even aware of what the other person had done. In fact, they did not even know each other until connected by Johann G. Buehler, famous for his work on the Prakrit language dictionary and as member of the Bombay branch of Royal Asiatic Society and fellow of Bombay University. He has written an article in volume 23 of the journal Indian Antiquary of 1894 commenting on and fully endorsing the astronomical researches of Tilak and Jacobi, revising the date of the Rigveda from what Max Muller had suggested. In order to appreciate the astronomical facts presented in this video, it is necessary to have a basic understanding of astronomy. As the Earth spins on its axis, producing night and day, it also moves about the Sun in an elliptical orbit that requires about 365 and 1/4 days to complete. The Earth's spin axis is tilted with respect to its orbital plane. This is what causes the seasons. When the Earth's axis points towards the Sun, it is summer for that hemisphere. When the Earth's axis points away, winter can be expected. Similarly, we have the other two seasons, namely spring and fall, when the Earth is at the other two cardinal points of its orbit around the Sun. In addition to the Earth revolving around the Sun and rotating around its own axis, tilted by about 23.5 degrees to the vertical, it has a third movement. It wobbles in space like an out of balance top. That is, the axis of rotation of the Earth is not constant. It moves around, creating a virtual double cone in space. This is called axial precession. It is caused by the gravitational influence of the Sun and the Moon acting on the Earth's equatorial bulge. Planets also exert some influence, though to a much lesser extent. Because of this axial precession of the Earth, the observed positions of stars in the sky seem to be different at different points of time. The observed shift is 1 degree every 71.5875 years, or the full wobble or cycle of axial precession takes 71.5875 multiplied with 360, which equals 25,771.5 years according to NASA. Also, the position of the equinoxes, that is, when length of the day time and night time are equal, and the solstices, that is, the longest or shortest days, shift in a cycle. The timings of seasons also shift. A useful construct for describing the locations of objects in the sky is the celestial sphere, which is considered to have an infinite radius. It is a geocentric model, that is, the center of the Earth is the center of the celestial sphere, and the sphere's poles and equatorial plane are coincident with those of the Earth. All objects in the sky can be conceived as being projected upon the inner surface of the celestial sphere. The ecliptic plane on the periphery of the celestial sphere is the plane of orbit of the Sun, that is, relative to Earth. The 2 points on the celestial sphere at which the equatorial plane and the ecliptic plane intersect are the 2 equinoxes, namely vernal equinox and autumnal equinox. The point on the ecliptic where the Sun is most north of the celestial equator is termed the summer solstice, and the point where it is most south of the celestial equator is termed the winter solstice. The solstices are at 90 degrees to the equinoxes. The equinoctial colure is the meridian or the great circle of the celestial sphere, which passes through the celestial poles and the 2 equinoxes, the first point of Aries and the first point of Libra. The solstitial colure is the meridian or great circle of the celestial sphere, which passes through the poles and the 2 solstices, the first point of Cancer and the first point of Capricorn. In his book, The Orion, Tilak establishes in 6 logical steps the true age of the Rigveda, along with a lot of corroborative evidence through different sources of Vedic texts. These 6 steps are: Step 1, Vedic Indians use the sidereal. Step 2, the ritual cycle is identical to the year. Step 3, the Vishuvan day, which is the central day of the ritual cycle or Satra, is identical to equinoctial day. Step 4, the year beginning was in vernal equinox. Step 5. Vernal equinox was in Mrigashira's star asterism. Step 6. When was vernal equinox in Orion or Mrigashira's? Come, let us now look at each of these 6 logical steps in detail. In the second chapter of his book titled Sacrifice alias the Year, Tilak talks about the dual functions of ancient Vedic priests or Hotar. They had to perform a timekeeping function in addition to their primary function of conducting or supervising sacrificial rituals. He establishes the fact that they had, in the absence of any sophisticated astronomical measurement tools, simply used the day-night cycles, the movements of the sun relative to Earth, and of the moon, the relative positions of stars every morning and night, and also the seasons. The sidereal year is based on stars or nakshatras, whereas the tropical year is based on seasons. A nakshatra is an asterism or a pattern. It may be a group of stars or even a single star. It may be part of one of the star constellations adopted by the West. We have 27 Indian nakshatras, some would say 28. What you see on the screen now is the equivalent names of these nakshatras in English, Sanskrit and Tamil. The nakshatras which are of interest in this video have been highlighted. There are several verses in Vedic texts alluding to the rishis, astronomers and purohits or priests using nakshatras as references for keeping track of time and the year. They did not depend on the seasons for this. The reason is not known, but definitely they would not have been aware of the astronomical fine details like precession of Earth. Among the several verses, I want to quote this one from the Taittiriya Brahmana, which is even today invoked during any Punyakavachanam or purification ceremony.
Yat punyam nakshatram tad badakurvedo babhyusham yada vai surya udedi adha nakshatram naidi yavari tatra suryo gached yatra jaghanyam pashyed tavadi kurveda yatkari syad punyah eva kurude evagam havai yajneshun cha savadhyumram cha matsyo niravasaya janchakara.
The gist of meaning of this verse is that good things like purification must be done when the star is auspicious. From this and the other Vedic verses, it is fairly obvious that the Vedic Indians used the concept of the sidereal year based on stars or nakshatras and not on tropical year based on seasons. Ritual offerings were made on every morning and evening, on every new moon and full moon, and at the commencement of every season, an ayana or half year. When this course of yearly sacrificial rituals, called Satra, was completed, it was naturally found that the year also had run its full course. These facts are borne out by several Vedic texts. Just to quote one of them from the Aitreya Brahmana of the Rigveda, in Kanda or book number 2 and verse number 17, bears testimony to this equivalence of the cycle of ritualistic sacrifices and the year. It goes thus.
त्रीणि च वै शतानि षष्ट्यश्च संवत्सरस्य हानि तावान् संवत्सरः संवत्सरः प्रजापतिः प्रजापतिर्यज्ञः.
Meaning of this verse, he who wishes for performing successfully the subsequent great sacrifices should repeat the 360 verses. For the year consists of 360 days. Such a year is meant here. The key words in this verse are Samvatsaraha, Prajapatihi, Prajapatir Yajna. The meaning, the year is the Prajapati or the Lord of creatures or creation or sacrifices, and Prajapati is the sacrifice. Thus it is very evident that for the ancient Vedic Indians, the ritual cycle and the year were identical.
यथा वै पुरुष एवं विषुवान् तस्य यदा दक्षिणोर्ध एवं पूर्वोर्धो विषुवरो यथोत्तरोर्ध एवमुत्तरोर्ध विषुवरस्तस्मादुत्तर इत्याचक्षते प्रबाहुत्सतशिर एव विषुवान् विदलसंहित हि वै पुरुषस्कद्धाति स्यूमेव मध्ये शीर्षो विज्ञायते पदाहुर्विषुवत्येवैव ततः संसेद्विषुवान् वा एतत्पुत्थानामुक्थम् विषुवानिति विषुवन्तो भवन्ति श्रेष्ठतामस्नुवत इति तत्तन्नादृत्यम् संवत्सर एव शम्भे भेदो वा एतः संवत्सरम् ततो यन्ति.
You just heard the verse number 22 from the book or Kanda 4 of Aitreya Brahmana of the Rigveda, which says that the Vishuvan day or the central day of the Satra or ritual cycle divided the year exactly into two halves. It was also the equator or the equinoctial day of the year when length of the day is equal to length of the night. If the middle of the year is an equinox, then the beginning must also be an equinox. Which of the two equinoxes, vernal or autumnal equinox, is the question? Tilak settles the answer to this question in the next step.
द्वादशद्योऽन्यदगोह्यस्यातिथ्येरणम् नृभवः ससन्ताः सुक्षेत्रा गृण्वन्ननायन्त सिन्धून् धन्वा तिष्ठन्नोषधीर्निम्नमापाः. According to the Rigveda verse we just heard, the Ribus or the genii of the seasons slackened their course and enjoyed the hospitality of the sun after toiling for the whole year. They rendered the fields fertile, they led forth the rivers, plants sprung upon the waste or deserts, and waters filled the hollows. This is a clear indication that the end of the old year and start of the new year was heralded by spring in the vernal equinox.
वसन्तो भीष्मो वर्षाः ते देवा ऋतवः शरद्धेमन्तः शिशिरस्ते पितरो यहेव पूज्यते धमासः स देवायो भक्षीयते स पितरो हरेव देवारात्रिः पितरः पुनरन्नः पूर्वाणो देवा अपरान्न पितरः स यत्रोदङ्गा वर्तते देवेषु तर्हि भवति देवां तर्हि यविकोपायत्यथ यत्र दक्षिणा वर्तते पितृषु तर्हि भवति पितॄन् तर्ह्यविकोपायति.
As per the verses of the Satapatha Brahmana of the Shukla Yajurveda that we just heard, the Vasanta or spring, Grishma summer and Varsha monsoon are the seasons of the Devas or gods. Sharad or autumn, Hemanta, that is pre-winter, and Shishira, winter, those are the seasons of the Pitris or forefathers. The increasing fortnight is of the Devas, the decreasing one is of the Pitris. The day is of the Devas, the night of the Pitris. Again, the first part of the day is of the Devas, the latter part of the day is of the Pitris. When he, that is the sun, turns to the north, he is amongst the Devas and protects them. When he turns to the south, he is among the Pitris or forefathers and protects them.
तौ दिव्यौ श्वानावभवताम् यो भ्यातृव्यवां स्यात् स चित्रायामग्निमादधीत अपकीर्त्यैव भ्रातृव्यान् ओजो बलमिन्द्रियं वीर्यमात्मन् दत्ते वसन्ता ब्राह्मणो अग्निमादधीत वसन्तो वै ब्राह्मणस्यर्थो त एवेन मृतावाधाय ब्रह्मवक्षसि भवति मुखं वा एतद्धृतूनाम्. देवगृहा वै नक्षत्राणि य एवं वेद गृह्येव भवति यानि वा हिमानि पृथिव्याच्चित्राणि तानि नक्षत्राणि तस्मादश्लीलनामग्रचित्रे नावस्येन्न यजेत यथा पापाहे कुरुते तादृदेव तत् देवनक्षत्राणि वा अन्यानि. यमनक्षत्राण्यन्यानि कृत्तिका प्रथमं विशाखे उत्तमं तानि देवनक्षत्राणि अनुराधा प्रथमम् अपभरणीरुत्तमं तानि यमनक्षत्राणि यानि देवनक्षत्राणि तानि दक्षिणेन पर्यन्ति यानि यमनक्षत्राणि.
As per the 3 verses of the Taittiriya Brahmana of the Krishna Yajurveda which we just heard, Vasanta or spring is the first season of the year, and nakshatras have been divided into 2 groups called the Deva Nakshatras and the Yama Nakshatras. From these verses it is clear that the spring was the first of the 3 seasons of Devayana or the half year period of the gods, and that the year in those days started when the sun was in the vernal equinox and went on up to the autumnal equinox when the sun was in northern hemisphere or to the north of the equator. At the autumnal equinox, the second half of the year of Pitrayana or period of forefathers started, with the sun moving south of the equator to the southern hemisphere. Vasanta, spring, Devayana, the year, and the Satra or sacrificial cycle all began with the vernal equinox. The autumnal equinox, which came after the rains, was the midpoint or the central day of the year and marked the start of Pitrayana and the second half of the year, as well as the ritual cycle or Satra. In chapter 5 of his book, Tilak starts with the meaning of the Sanskrit word Mrigashiras or Mrigashirsha as antelope's head, suggesting the shape of the nakshatra or asterism of stars. Mriga in Sanskrit means deer or antelope, and Shiras or Shirsha means head. What you now see on the screen is a sketch in the book of the Mrigashiras asterism in the Orion constellation of stars rotated by 90 degrees. The position of the asterism is corroborated by 2 different streams of proof. 1. Vedic legends of the antelope's head being pierced by the arrow, which is the belt of Orion according to Western astronomers, described in detail by Tilak, which I am not going into for reasons of brevity of this video. And 2. The contiguous nakshatras or stars of Rohini corresponding to Aldebaran, which can be clearly seen next to Orion, and Ardra corresponding to Betelgeuse, which can also be clearly seen in the right shoulder of Orion.
Shvanam basto bodhayitaramabravit samvatsara idamadhya vyakhyata.
Commenting on this Rigveda verse, Sainacharya, the 14th century scholar in Vijayanagara Empire and commentator of Vedas, says, "The awakener is the dog. You have made this world today luminous after the year has expired, that is, the rainy season is past. The rays of the sun and moon are again visible." We have already seen that the year starts with Devayana, comprising the 3 seasons of Vasanta, Grishma and Varsha. This means that when the sun is to the south of the equator, it is the night of the Devas, and his rays sleep during this period, the latter half of the year or Pitrayana. When the sun comes over to the north of the equator again, the dog or Canis will awaken him. In other words, the dog commences the year at the vernal equinox. The reference of dogs is to the Canis Major and Canis Minor constellation or asterism on either side of the Milky Way. You can see them on the screen along with Mrigashiras as in the cover sketch of Tilak's book Orion, and also as captured in a real picture of the night sky. When the vernal equinox is in Orion or Mrigasirisham, the constellation is remarkable for its brilliancy, lighting up the whole sky, helping the Vedic Indians see all these very vividly and inspiring the Vedic legends connecting the dogs, the pathway to the other world or Milky Way, and the antelope's head pierced by Indra's arrows, that is Orion's belt. The reference to dogs is also found in the two verses in chapter 14 of book 10 of Rig Veda, which we shall hear now.
अतिद्रवसारमेयौ श्वानौ चतुरक्षौ शबलौ साधुना पथा अथ पितॄन्सु विदत्रामुपेहि यमेन ये सधमादं मदन्ति यौ ते श्वानौ यमरक्षितारौ चतुरक्षौ पथिरक्षी नृचक्षसौ ताभ्यामेनं परिदेहि राजन् स्वस्ति चास्मा अनमीवं च धेहि.
Meaning of the first verse: pass by a secure path beyond the two spotted four-eyed dogs, the progeny of Sarma, and join the wise Pitris who rejoice joyfully with Yama. Meaning of the second verse: entrust in, O king, to your two dogs, which are your protectors, Yama, the four-eyed guardians of the road to heaven, renowned by men, and grant him prosperity and health. The overall meaning is the two dogs of Yama, the Lord of Death, are supposed to be guarding the pathway to the other world.
यदुदञ्च वृषाकपे गृहमिन्द्राजगन्तन क्वा अस्य पुल्वघो मृगः कमगञ्जनयोपनो विश्वस्मादिन्द्र उत्तरः.
In the Rig Veda verse we just heard, the sun in the form of Vrishakapi is thus addressed by Indra: O mighty Vrishakapi, when rising upwards you would come to our house. Where would your sinning mriga or antelope be? Where the pleasing mriga would go? This means when the sun goes to the house of Indra, the sun's mriga or antelope would be invisible. In other words, the sun being then in Orion or Mriga, the constellation of Orion would be invisible, and this at the time when the sun is about to enter the house of Indra, that is Devayana, about to go to the north of the equator. The passage is fully discussed by Tilak in chapter 7 of the book. Based on the facts highlighted so far, Tilak has in his conclusion said, I have endeavored to show that the traditions recorded in the Rig Veda unmistakably point to a period not later than 4000 BC, when the vernal equinox was in Orion, or in other words, when the dog star, or the dog as we have it in the Rig Veda, commenced the equinoctial year. Tilak perhaps assumes that the reader would be familiar with the dating of nakshatras or star asterisms at certain points in the sky in ancient times by noted scholars of astronomy. So he has not explained how he got the time period when the vernal equinox was in Orion as 4000 BCE or earlier, though he has referred indirectly to Vedanga Jyotisha, an Indian treatise on astronomy. However, we can use this astronomical chart giving the positions of star constellations or asterisms in vernal equinox over a long period of time in the past. As you can see, the right shoulder of Orion featuring the Ardra nakshatra and the belt of Orion, that is the arrow piercing Mrigashirsha, were in vernal equinox only around 4700 BCE. So we have two benchmark years now, 4000 BCE as per Tilak and 4700 BCE as per the precession chart. Tilak states on page 80 in chapter 4 of his book The Orion, quoting the famous astronomer Krishna Shastri Godbole, using the Vedanga Jyotisha, another ancient Indian treatise on astronomy, while describing the positions of the four cardinal points of the ecliptic, namely the two equinoxes and the two solstices in ancient times, that the vernal equinox was at the beginning of Ardra, between the head and the right shoulder of Orion. In addition, Professor Jacobi has given in his article titled on the date of the Rig Veda in the Indian Antiquary Journal, volume 23 of 1894 of Common Era, tables for dating of precession, giving the longitudes of principal nakshatras at different times in the past based on the translation of the famous astronomical treatise Surya Siddhanta by W.D. Whitney and Ebenezer Burgess. Longitude of stars is measured from the vernal equinox as degrees to the east. According to these tables, in 4000 BCE, the Mrigashirisha asterism or Lambda Orionis had a longitude of 5 degrees 38 minutes and Ardra or Betelgeuse 9 degrees 42 minutes. Please note that a degree has 60 minutes. As per the supplementary table, axial precession of 1 degree 28 minutes happens in 100 years. Therefore, when the vernal equinox was in Orion or specifically at the end of Mrigashirisha asterism or Lambda Orionis and at the beginning of or 0 degrees of Ardra or Betelgeuse, the date was around 4661 BCE. This is calculated from the table as shown. However, if we take the beginning of Mrigashirisha, which has a longitude of 5 degrees 38 minutes, it will be 4384 BCE. Thus, we have two more estimates of dating of Rig Veda. A similar result is obtained in the online interactive precession dating model for nakshatras developed by Mr. Kishore Kumar and hosted on geogebra.org. Let us start with the most recent vernal equinox that happened only a few weeks ago at 2:54 am Indian Standard Time on March 22 of 2023 of Common Era at Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra, that is Gamma Pegasi and Alpha Andromedae. You can easily verify the nakshatra on that day in any almanac or panchang. Going back in time, according to Surya Siddhanta, the vernal equinox was last at beginning of Ardra in 4300 BCE. When we repeat the same thing according to modern astronomical system of Lahiri, it is 4475 BCE. All these calculations may have an error of plus or minus 6.5 years corresponding to 10 minutes of longitude. So now we have two more dating estimates, namely 4300 BCE and 4475 BCE. Professor Jacobi also establishes that Mrigashiras was in vernal equinox but with a different logic based on a different set of verses of the Rig Veda and other Vedic texts. For reasons of time, I am not elaborating those but only giving his conclusion. According to Jacobi, the year started in ancient times with the rainy season or summer solstice in Uttara Falguni or Uttaradam in Tamil or Denabola constellation in Western astronomy, which also corresponds to the position of vernal equinox being in Mrigashiras end or Ardra beginning. Uttara Falguni or Beta Leonis had a longitude of 93 degrees 32 minutes in the year 4000 BCE according to the tables. We need to find the dating corresponding to 10 degrees of Uttara Falguni in summer solstice as per the positions of cardinal points calculated by Krishna Shastri Godbole based on Vedanga Jyotisha, which was quoted by Tilak and we referred earlier. This belongs to a dating of 4441 BCE using the same table as before and as shown on the screen. This dating is also borne out by the online interactive precession dating model for nakshatras at geogebra.org. We get 4500 BCE for 10 degree of Uttara Falguni in summer solstice. Jacobi also points out that either the beginning point of the year was being changed constantly throughout the Rig Vedic period or different year beginnings were being used simultaneously for different purposes such as the ritual year, civil year, scholastic year, etc. Thus, we may include as year beginnings the winter solstice at Uttara Bhadrapada or autumnal equinox in the middle of Moola. But for any of these year beginnings, for the nakshatra positions indicated, the vernal equinox was always at end of Margashiras or beginning of Ardra. Even Tilak has discussed this possibility of different year beginnings used during Rigvedic period in detail in his book. I am not going into those details now due to time factor. Therefore, the premise of the year beginning being at vernal equinox in Margashiras, as indicated in step 4 earlier, is not critical to the final conclusion of the dating of Rigveda. For all the other 3 year beginnings also, the position of vernal equinox in Margashiras near Ardra is valid, and that is the critical fact in reaching a conclusion on the dating of Rigveda. Tilak, after reading Jacobi's essay forwarded by Beulah, wrote a short article revising the dating of Rigveda to 4500 BCE. Johann Beulah, who connected Tilak and Jacobi, wrote an article titled A Note on Professor Jacobi's Age of the Veda and Professor Tilak's Orion in the Indian Antiquary, Volume 23 of 1894 of Common Era. He said, "It seems to me that what has been set forth above is quite sufficient to make it very probable that some Vedic writings have preserved reminiscences of a time when the nakshatra Praustapada or Bhadrapada stood at the winter solstice and the vernal equinox fell in Margashiras, and that this arrangement has left its traces in the rules regarding the seasons for certain ceremonies and sacrifices. The period when this arrangement was correct is, according to Professor Jacobi's table, the year 4420 BCE. So, in conclusion, we can say that from the foregoing analysis of astronomical data from the Vedic texts, we have a range of time estimates from 4000 to 4700 BCE for dating of the Rigveda. Rigveda must have been composed or revealed over a period of several centuries. Some of the earliest hymns must be really very old, belonging to ancient times. We can therefore conclude from the researches done independently by Tilak and Jacobi and endorsed by Beulah that many of the hymns of the Rigveda, which contain legends inspired by the stars in the sky, are as old as 4000 to 4500 BCE. That is, they were composed or revealed as early as 6000 to 6500 years ago. We are deeply indebted to many European Indologists and Sanskritists for their services to the cause of Sanskrit and Vedic literature. In particular, T.H. Griffith